Serious, people who have found a secret room or space in their house. How long did you live in the house before you found it and what was in it? What was the eventual outcome of finding the room? Moved into an 18th century farmhouse as a little kid and found a small panel door in the back of the large closet in my small room. Turned out to be a small finished room over the eaves that had a small portal window. I spent hours in that room reading and hiding from the world. This sounds like a childhood dream come true. I'm an adult and would like something like this. Adulthood is the perfect time to fulfill childhood dreams. When clearing out my grandma's house, I found a small door in the wall of the basement that led to a tiny room. According to my mother, that's where they hid the family heirlooms when thieving relatives came to town. I was mostly interested in the fact that it was covered in scribbles from my mom and her sisters growing up. Ah, that reminds me of my grandmother. Your other grandparents will be joining us, so I'm putting away the good dishes. I mean, a passive-aggressive slight isn't exactly rude if it's true, though, right? It was about a year into owning our house. We actually found 2 secret rooms. One was just a room under the stairs that was closed off. Had some toys from the 70s in it. The really crazy one was when we redid the insulation in our attic. One of the workers asked if I knew there was a room up there. I had no idea. So we cut open the drywall and there were stacks on stacks of boxes from the 60s. Like a ton of boxes. And they were all full. So I opened them up expecting some cool stuff. And they were full of freaking pine cones. One of the bigger bummers of my life. In my house there was an upstairs bedroom that was made into a game room for me and my sister. When we were about 12 years old, we realized that a section of the paneling came off and there was a small closet-sized room behind it. We kept it a secret so that when friends came over we would have the ultimate hiding spot for hide and seek. A few years later we were talking to our parents about what we found and they said that the house was built during the Prohibition era, so they most likely used it as a place to hide alcohol. I went to visit my grandparents a few months after they had moved into a new house out in the country. I got into a bit of horseplay with a cousin and got shoved into a wall. It broke a big hole and we realized there was a large empty space back there. With Grandpa's help we tore the wall down and found a little room full of planting trays and grow lamps. There were a number of books about horticulture and one specifically about growing marijuana. #X200B, there was no secret way in as far as we could tell. Someone had just walled the entire room off for some reason. Hidden closet in basement wall after 20 years of living in the house. We found some personal documents of no real interest, a newspaper from the day after Pearl Harbor, and a hand-drawn cartoon of a pregnant Lucy yelling "Goddammit Charlie Brown." Update, as promised. Well, I only half remembered things, but as promised, here is what we found. The newspaper turned out to be a reprint, so not valuable but still fun to look through. The cartoon is just as I remembered. Goes to show what I find important. But I had completely forgotten about the photo album. I'm going to try and track these people down and return their memories. Thanks for poking at me to dig this stuff up. Please tell me you saved that drawing. Not sure where we put it. I'm gonna have to look for it now. Pretty sure we didn't throw it away. You had better show us. Half the attic is walled off from renovations from one of the previous owners. I can't seem to convince my dad to let me cut a piece of the drywall out to look inside. This house is from the 1920s, which is rather old for New Zealand. It would be a rather large space, about the size of our kitchen. #X200B, edit, he said no, and told you all to duck off, but I'm gonna look at it tomorrow anyway. Hopefully it's not empty. Wish me luck. Edit 2, wow guys, I didn't expect such a response. Okay, so it's morning right now and I'm finally alone in the house. I've spent the last few minutes gouging an inch-wide hole in the drywall and it's darker than Vandablack in there. My flashlight just isn't powerful enough. Should I buy a glow stick or something or risk making the hole bigger? Also answers to common questions. I'm female, I live in Auckland, the space is above the lounge so definitely no ways to get in. It's probably the oldest house in the suburb, which has connections to a prominent land war in NZ. Asbestos. Now we think it was walled off to allow for a proper wall as the attic walls are just the house's declining roof. Though it doesn't make a lot of sense to wall it off entirely. It's a massive waste of space. The reason your dad doesn't want you making holes. There was a hidden door behind the wallpaper, obviously the doorknob was taken off, so it blends in with the wall, in the hallway. We lived in this house for 6 years and I found out about this door 2 years ago, When we opened it, we saw a skeleton in the corner. Not gonna lie, that scared me shitless, although it was just a prop left by the past owners of our house. Probably to scare the shit out of you when you found it as a joke. Well, they did do a good job. I'd like to imagine that Therese, some guy who every so often remembers the skeleton he placed in a hidden room and chuckles wondering if anyone has found it yet. If it was me, I would love to reach out to him and tell him how he scared the shit out of me. Probably would have made his entire week. Not necessarily secret, but my old house was a duplex. There was a hobbit-sized door on the bottom floor, and I glanced in there a few times but only saw pipes and different electrical units and stuff. There was some of the landlord's maybe past residents' junk in the corner. After a few years I explored behind it and realized it leads to the other half of the house. Found it moving in. Latchet bottom of corner of closet. Cape Cod style house, crawl space to basically uncarpeted room with 2 windows over garage. Fell through one time. Anything in there? Weak floors, apparently. There was a small door under some stairs, almost like Harry Potter's room, in my old apartment in Venezuela. We'd lived there for a year until I leaned on it and felt it wiggle a little and realized it was a small square door. I was too scared to open it, so had my dad do it, and about 20 or so cockroaches flooded out. Never have I felt so much panic. That sounds like it's straight out of my nightmares. My old house had this weirdly large concrete slab in the corner of the yard that was covered by a ton of leaves when we moved in. I thought it was maybe foundation for a shed, but it was in a very odd location. Years later, when I was getting ready to move, it bugged me that I didn't know what it was for. I got a friend to help me come dig around it, expecting to confirm that it was just an old foundation. We dug for days in the middle of August. We had to start digging at night to protect ourselves from the heat. We got about 15 feet down and the concrete wasn't showing any signs of ending. We eventually struck a pipe with a nozzle, and discovered that there was more concrete moving towards the center of the yard. About a week later, my dad came home and almost had a stroke when he saw that we were digging up half the yard. We had sold the house and were expected to leave by September 1st. He made us fill it all in and I left home never finding out what it was. Some of my teachers who were longtime town residents told me that my neighborhood had been farmland before development and that there may have been several bomb or fallout shelters in that area. I would have loved to have found an entrance into the bunker, if that's what it was. I just googled concrete septic tank, and it definitely seems like you were trying to get into an old tank of shit. Well, thanks, just googled it and realized there was a bunch of these, empty and not hooked up to anything, on a lot behind a grocery store in my hometown that as kids my friends and I played inside. Watched Home Alone and saw the attic that Macaulay Culkin was staying in and wondered if we had one in our townhouse. Ran around with a stepladder until I found it in my mom's closet. Got on my tiptoes on the stepladder and fought the door open, ended up being a big piece of plywood, and peered into the attic. A mouse colony stared back. It was like that scene in Ratatouille. Decades worth of feces covered the whole space. My mom was not happy once I told her. We moved shortly after. Edit, thanks for the gold, kind stranger. Helping my granddad move house, we accidentally found access to the underfloor area, not even big enough to really call a crawl space, I don't think, spotty memory. There was a small pile of trash from the 60s 70s, juice cans, chocolate bar wrappers and crumpled newspapers, and bits of discarded construction debris and some broken tools. We think it must have been used by the builders in lieu of a trash can. It was cool, an accidental time capsule. That is kinda cool. I lived in the house or my grandma for a few years, secret room beneath a trapdoor on the second floor, which was basically a void between walls on the complicated first floor. Was used to hide Jewish families during World War II. That's is so interesting. By any chance do you have photos? I bought a house back in 2010. There was a wooden box next to an old oak tree in my backyard. It had no doors and no way to look into it. The box was about as big as a love seat and it looked as old as the house. About 30 years, but very well kept, no bug damage. I waited for about 2 years until I got the nerve to open it. It was empty. What were you expecting to be in the box? I watch a lot of TV. Bones. Or money.